after this happened, higher level people in the organization pulled me aside and said, everybody knows that Exxon Mobil controls the ASTM Petroleum Products Committee. Following the statement by the Exxon Mobil rep that Exxon would vote against the standard if the subcommittee approved any of the changes that I was asking for, subcommittee members were saying, well, your objection makes sense, let's see if we can make this change in the future. But essentially her threat about ExxonMobil's position caused the subcommittee to clam up at that point and not make any of the changes that various individual members had told me made sense. And the result of that exercise proved to be that the subcommittee did not make any of the changes that I had asked for and instead approved the standard as ExxonMobil had wanted it, with the false information and unreasonable restrictions included in it. It turned out later that when I had been asking these questions of the subcommittee, what is your information, your data to support this, and they were telling me, one person said, you're not entitled to that information, and then others simply told me that they didn't have it, and then finally, a year later, came the admission from the subcommittee chair that the only comprehensive report that the subcommittee had had before it was a report from the University of Georgia which spoke in uniformly positive terms about the use of vegetable oil fuel in fuel oil burners. So it turned out later as well that the person who was in charge of drafting the standard, the technical contact for the subcommittee, that his experience was working in biodiesel. And the significance of that is that biodiesel starts as vegetable oil, but the vegetable oil has to undergo a complicated and energy-intensive transformation of the molecule in order to result in biodiesel. It requires the use of hazardous chemicals, methane and lye, to turn the vegetable oil into the biodiesel, and it also results in hazardous waste as a byproduct of the biodiesel. Whereas our company's approach is that the same diesel engine or fuel oil burner can run on simply the pure vegetable oil, be it from a waste source or a fresh or virgin source, without the need to transform the vegetable oil molecules into the new substance biodiesel. However, there has to be certain equipment installed to allow that to function correctly. So the significance of the fact that the technical contact for the subcommittee was somebody with a background in the biodiesel industry is that the biodiesel industry does not look with favor upon the use of the pure vegetable oil, because if this use catches on, then there's no need to run the vegetable oil through the biodiesel plant to transform the molecules and turn them into biodiesel. Nationwide, the bigger producers of biodiesel at the bigger biodiesel facilities tend to be larger corporations, and not to say that there are many small local cooperatives such as Oasis Biodiesel in Berkeley that are collecting waste vegetable oil and making their own biodiesel, and their hearts are in the right place and they're doing a very good thing. But if you look at nationwide, the production volumes of biodiesel, it generally comes from these bigger plants run by big businesses that want to keep the plants fully running and operating, and so therefore they are concerned that if the idea of the straight vegetable oil catches on, that it's going to put their biodiesel facilities out of production. So the fact that the technical contact for this subcommittee, who was in charge of drafting the standard that contained all the false information and prejudices against vegetable oil fuel, had a background in that he had been the owner's representative and the managing developer of a 45 million gallon a year biodiesel facility, versus his experience with vegetable oil fuel was that he owned a organic farm in Maine called Laughingstock Farm, in which he had used vegetable oil to the tune of 4,000 gallons a year to heat the greenhouses in his farm. So his relative experience was 45 million gallon biodiesel facility, and then he had used it for 4,000 gallons of vegetable oil to heat the greenhouses on his organic farm in Maine. Showed, which we discovered later, that his true allegiance and his loyalty and his wealth had all come and were owed to the biodiesel industry. And in fact, he was really a dilettante when it came to vegetable oil fuel. This association has based its entire standard that it's developed so far concerning governing vegetable oil fuel for use in fuel oil burners, which is now law in many states, based on this guy's use of vegetable oil, 4,000 gallons a year, to heat his greenhouses on his organic farm in Maine. And that is a sham. Now, there was a subcommittee meeting yesterday at which some folks who you know were there, and they can attest to this if you care to ask them.
Absolutely.
That I was asking this technical contact, whose name is Ralph Turner, for the evidence again. I asked him for what is the data, evidence, reports, studies to justify the false statements and the unreasonable restrictions that are now embodied in many state laws by their adoption automatically of the standard that ASTM has published, which the biodiesel obviously was behind by virtue of Ralph Turner's background that I just explained,
Yep.
and which Exxon Mobil was instrumental in getting passed in its unfortunate form by the threat made by the Exxon Mobil representative to the subcommittee members. So I was asking him again yesterday, what is the data, evidence, reports, and studies to justify this? And he had no answer to that question. So I have asked the ASTM if they would consider establishing a separate subcommittee of the overall Petroleum Products Committee. It's kind of ironic that for the alternative fuels, we have to go to the petroleum industry to have them adopt standards that will allow the sale of our fuel in states around the country. But that's
It is ironic.
It is ironic, yeah. And they are now considering allowing the creation of a special subcommittee to deal with the vegetable oil fuels. The chemical name for vegetable oil is triglyceride. Mm-hmm. So I'm hopeful that they will allow that to happen. But again, if the committee is stacked in favor of the biodiesel industry, and if ExxonMobil behaves in a predatory manner, as it has done not only with regards to triglyceride fuel, but other new alternative fuels that are trying to come on the market, and that I witnessed that happening in another subcommittee earlier in the week with regards to a different kind of alternative fuel, then this whole effort will be for naught. A concern that I have is that ASTM is led by an EPA official.